I'm here from Sustainea on enabling low-carbon bio-PET, Sustaenea's one-step glycol innovation. And to tell you all about it, their Global Commercial Director, Matthew Berdy. So, Matthew, please.
Any of these work? All right, does this work? Is this on? Just switch it up. Down? How about now? Oh, that's much better. How's everybody doing? Made it to day two. Congratulations. Hope everybody had a good night last night. Didn't stay out too late. Didn't drink too much. Maybe didn't drink enough. I don't know. I don't judge. Just curious. So thank you again for the introduction. Again, we were one of the award winners for the Market Mover Award. Thank you very much for that recognition. It means a lot to Sustainea. And yes, I'm the Global Commercial Director for my company. I'm very happy to talk to you about a topic that probably some of you think about, bioplastics. I think we'll start there by answering a pretty simple question. Who's Sustainea? You probably don't know who we are, but you might know our parents. So Sustainea was formed 3 years ago as a joint venture by Braskem and Sojitz. Braskem has a very long history in the bioplastic space, about 15 plus years. They first went into the space introducing biomaterials into polypropylene, polyethylene, and to the point now where they have their own brand, I'm Green, a very successful initiative within the company of Braskem. Meredith, we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. Shout out to my Braskem colleague in the crowd. And Sojitz, who's been a long partner of Braskem in the Asian markets, who has their own interests when it comes to biosustainability as well. And the two of them said, you know what, it would be really powerful if we got together to push this initiative of making a bio-monoethylene glycol, which is one of the building blocks for PET plastics. So if you're wondering how monoethylene glycol is typically made, it's a petrochemical derivative, goes through a pretty long chain that you see on the slide here. Start with petroleum, as most petrochemicals do. Go through to make naphtha, ethylene, ethylene oxide, ethylene glycol, along with many other petrochemicals that come off these supply chains, right? But the point is it's a very long process. It a lot of places to pick up carbon and inefficiencies and have an environmental effect. Big economies of scale, very well-established process. Our process is a little simpler. We start with a plant, in this case, corn, which I think we can all appreciate in this room. And that's our source of dextrose. And through a catalytic process, we go directly from the dextrose to make a bio-monoethylene glycol. It's that simple. Straight from dextrose to bio-monoethylene glycol. And so what that leads to is a much more efficient environmentally chain. And if you're wondering what that looks like from a carbon basis, for example, it looks a little something like this. So you see over here, not all fossil MEGs are created equal. And if you're wondering why there's the reduction of 80 to 110%, well, we're not actually producing the material today. We will, but that's our best guess right now. So it could be slightly carbon positive, it could be carbon neutral, it could be a little carbon negative, not quite sure yet. We'll determine that once we actually start production. If I could look into the future and know that definitively, I would be doing another job, trust me. Not that I don't enjoy my work. So we compare that to this global average in the middle here, fossil MEG, which is 90% of the production. That's how we get the 80 to 110%. But we like to point out there's other sources, especially in China, because not all monoethylene glycols are created equal. So worst case scenario, 14% of global production is this coal gasification in China. So it's not a significant piece, but it's also not an insignificant piece either. You could be having a much larger carbon effect on your chain just by that one decision. If you look at the production average of China in general, which is almost 50% of global, China's a bit of a market player, as we all know, you're still quite a bit higher than the global average. And this is pertinent because there's a lot of production in China these days, especially on plastics. But for fairness, for talking about our production, we, as I said, like to talk about the global average. Best case scenario, you've got the most clean MEG there is in the world. It comes out of Europe. It's only about 2%. But again, we like to be fair, so we point that out as well. But again, versus that global average, we're quite carbon reductive, almost carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative. Again, we'll see in about 2.5 years. If you're not familiar with what bio-MEG goes into, we really have two major markets. polyester fibers, so for making apparel. In theory, we could make every bit of clothing you're wearing be corn-based, or partially corn-based at least, about 30% corn-based. Your shirt, your pants, your shoes, if you're wearing sneakers, probably not leather. Bio-MEG goes into polyester fibers for making those materials. Of course, PET resins, you know, you're drinking from a plastic bottle from Coke, Niagara, Pepsi, whatever, other major channel for those materials. Now, we do have a slight co-product offtake as well, bio-monopropylene glycol, often used in home and personal care, food packaging, things like that. This material is most certainly going to be carbon negative, so it actually helps to reduce your overall carbon footprint for your chain. Again, a co-product, it's not really a focus for us. We're more about the bio-MEG for plastics and polyester fibers, but it is definitely something we make. Of course, very happy to be partnering with Premiant. We have to get our dextrose from somewhere. We have a supply chain like everybody does. And we searched long and hard to make sure we had a responsible partner for this. And this is why we settled on them. First and foremost, they are a leading producer in food and industrial chemicals that are plant-based, renewable sources. Can't be a renewable company if you're not looking at your entire supply chain, of course. They have one of the most energy-efficient wet mills in the entire United States, Scope 2 emissions. And their own Scope 1 and Scope 2, they're already 65% of the way there when you talk about their 2030 goals. So they're ahead of the curve. Again, we were looking for a partner that was taking environmental initiatives seriously, just as we do. And of course, for their sourcing, regenerative agriculture is very important to them as well. So for the ultimate source of biomaterial, which is corn for us, we wanted to make sure we had somebody who was using minimal amounts of pesticides, minimal amount of tilling, crop rotation, minimal effect on the water table. Premium checked all these marks, and so we're very, very happy to have them as a partner, so much so that we are planning to be pipeline connected to their facility once it's built. That's how dedicated they are to us and we are to them. Of course, the question comes up, well, you know, corn, it's something I like to eat sometimes. I don't really want you to increase the price of that. You know, obviously corn is important to everybody in this room. And we'd like to point out the overall efficiency of our process. So plastic is important to modern life. You know, corn is one of those things, again, that we often like to eat. The U.S. total land area is about 916 million hectares, you know, give or take a couple million, depending on your math, I suppose. 45% of that's agricultural land. And as you go through the math here, you see croplands, 40% of that. Corn is 9% of that. So how efficient is our process? Our plant, which will have a capacity of anywhere from 150 to 200,000 metric tons per year. In order to feed our entire plant, the growth of corn is so efficient in Indiana, and our process is so efficient in making bio-monoethylene glycol, you need 0.009% of arable land, agricultural land in the United States in order to accomplish that. In fact, if you were to replace every single pound of monoethylene glycol, fossil-based, in the United States that we consume in order to make bioplastics, even then, you would only need 0.06% of all available land. Seems like a pretty good trade-off to me, but I'm also probably a little biased. But yeah, let's talk about corn. Again, I'm sure we've seen more than a few pictures of corn. We have our own. 99% of corn is not even used to eat. A lot of people in this room, I'm sure, know that. Most people don't. I didn't. Only 1% is what we call sweet corn. It's used for, you know, what you buy in the grocery store, popcorn, edible corn. The other 99% is industrial usage. So it's somehow further processed for animal feed, other downstream productions. And the real money makers for corn, of course, are protein and fiber. So when you think of, you know, like wheat protein, you've probably seen how expensive that is. You get starch, you get oil. But that's really the driver for corn is protein and fiber. From the starch, that's where we pull the dextrose. Dextrose has two main industrial purposes right now, both of which are big industries in and of themselves. Of course, ethanol for biofuels. Just heard a panel about that. That's been a big growth in the past 15, 20 years in particular. And of course, there's high fructose corn syrup, which for better or worse has been declining by about 1.5 to 2% per year for the past 10 years, depending on, which is due to consumer tastes, as it were, shifting away from sugary drinks. And so we're very happy that our production adds a diversification of the use of that dextrose to the industry. So it's another outlet, another way to use corn, a productive way to use corn. And so we don't add to the cost of corn, but we help to diversify its overall use. So what's our overall value proposition? What do we really add to the chain here? So again, we're supportive of renewable practices, environmental safety. One of the biggest values here, at least the way the market's moving, since recycling is such a big deal as it should be for plastics, is this is drop-in and readily incorporable and completely supportive of recycling initiatives. So if recycling helps you in the end of life use of plastics to be responsible, we help at the beginning of life. It's a full chain. That's how we add value as well. And while biodegradable has its pluses and minuses, at least if you're looking at recycling initiatives, this is certainly more supportive of that. So will recycling change in the future? Maybe yes, maybe no, but in the current climate, this is supportive of that. Of course, as I mentioned and spent some time on overall CO2 reduction, and just in case the market really wants you to know, to make sure you're being environmentally friendly, we have full C14 measure tracking of the biogenic carbon. So what does the overall chain look like? It's a pretty simple one. Again, we start with corn from the farmer. The farmer sends it to Premium. They make the dextrose. We take the dextrose. We make the bio-MEG directly. We send the bio-MEG to plastics manufacturers and customers who then make downstream consumer products. Plastic bottles, shirts, pants, sneakers, those things. Very quick, very efficient, and again, driving towards being more environmentally sustainable. So I mentioned earlier we're not up and running quite yet. It's a project in development. And as we all know, we're currently in the second half of 2025. We are currently in discussions, commercial discussions for letters of interest, offtake agreements. Planned start of construction is middle of next year. It's about a 2-year project, $400 million investment into the plant, into the Indiana economy, which will create anywhere from 150 to 200 good paying American jobs. And then once the plant starts up, it's off to the races. And we'll be very much looking forward to having a positive effect on supporting the materials that make modern life happen. That's all I've got for you. If you have further questions, by all means, we have a setup at MSO3 out there. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate all of your considerations and your attention.